Welcome to the Family Brand Show. We're Chris and Melissa Smith of FamilyBrand.com, husband and wife, parents of 5, and we want to help you take back your family and to live life on your terms.
And we know being a family can feel really overwhelming. Parents tell us they feel like they're being pulled in a million different directions. It's so challenging to navigate the uncertainty and all the chaos that's happening in the world right now.
And that's why we want to bring you every single week actionable tips and strategies that you can implement in your daily life to become a better parent, to become a better spouse, and to build a stronger family. And look, there's never been a better time and a more important time than right now to take back your family. You can define what your family stands for, or the world is going to do it for you. And the world needs strong families now more than ever. And it starts right here with your family.
So Melissa and I have been having a conversation. We've had this conversation a number of times, but lately in particular, about how much autonomy do you give your children to just run wild and free and make decisions, take some risks. And we're going to share a few experiences we've had and are experimenting with this as a family. And Melissa also has this book that she's read called The Anxious Generation that has been very profound. I've not read it, but what she shared with me has been awesome. And just a little plug. We are going to do a Family Brand Croatian Cruise in June. I don't know if we've talked about that on the podcast. We went on this experience as a family 2 summers ago. We just went with a bunch of other entrepreneurs and their children. And it was so magical, like stopping off in these little Croatian villages. The culture of there is amazing. There's a strong sense of identity and purpose. And I would say family is really powerful. The owner of the business, Solomori, Anthony, we became really good friends with he and his wife, and they're incredible. They've been through the Family Brand program, most adorable little family, and they've just an awesome family that's committed to strengthening their own family. They've been an amazing demonstration of building out their family values. Anyways, he reached out to us and said, hey, I love your family, love you guys. What if we did another Croatian cruise, but made it like a Family Brand cruise? So we've had families that have already booked. There's only 10 cabins left, and so if an amazing magical experience like that, is intriguing to you, reach out to Melissa.
Yeah, you can email me, melissa@familybrand.com. It's June, I don't have the dates in front of me, 20 to 27th, give or take. And yeah, Croatia is beautiful. Can't wait to share with more families. And just to jump back a little bit about the topic of today, I was asking Chris before we recorded, I was like, wait, we already talked about this book and like some of our takeaways from it. And the whole thing isn't about this book, but it's this idea and this way of living that we're influenced by this book. And he's like, it doesn't matter. Like, this is a good reminder, even if we have. So honestly, this is an interesting thing about recording the podcast. Chris and I sometimes can't remember what conversations we had on the podcast and which conversations we had outside of the podcast.
I think you're what now, over like 240 episodes or something?
Yeah, and so you might be getting a double dose of
but if it's the truth, if it's good info, I don't think you can hear it enough.
And these are things that I am still thinking about. And it's a good book if you're still thinking about it months. It was published in 2024. If you're still thinking about it and still imagining your family months later, it's worth the revisit, I think.
And I think our intention, obviously, with the podcast is to always bring you insights or thoughts or ideas or challenges that we are experiencing real time. This is a conversation we're in, and we hear from so many of you that's really useful. And so I think part of the reason we wanted to talk about this today is because from my vantage point, our oldest son just recently told us this past week, he was like, man, when we were in New York City and you guys allowed me to go to the MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, by myself, it's like a transformative experience for him, to a degree that I don't think Melissa and I even realized until he's been sharing more of this with us later. And I don't think he would have been able to have that experience had we went as an entire family. But it required he's 17. How do we feel about him just cruising around New York City by himself, getting on the subway? We felt great about it. He was comfortable to do it.
Maybe it was a little outside of, I think, both of our comfort zones. We don't live in the city. We live in this tiny town. So it was just a lot of new navigating and things coming at him.
Totally. So I'll just share a bunch of experiences that come to mind for me, and then we can dive in. We were in Paris last year, and our oldest 2 children were like, can we just go look around Paris? hop on the subway and just mob around Paris. And again, it's like your initial reaction sometimes like, well, we're in a foreign country, we're in a city, and it's like, well, they are 16 and 17. They do have cell phones. Europe, like, for example, might be safer than a lot of like other places we've taken them. There was another time, our 3 oldest, we were in Croatia, and they were like, hey, can we rent scooters and just cruise around?
It would have been Split.
Oh, yeah, Split. We ended it in Dubrovnik. We're like, yeah. And then our second youngest recently was like, I want to ride my bike to school because he has a buddy, a little friend of his that lives right by the school. So in all of these, a little bit comes up for you initially like, oh, is that safe? Is that okay? And I think our natural tendency a lot of times is to like, just, no, don't do that. No, that wouldn't be safe. No, you couldn't. And that's what this book is so awesome. It talks about how we have become more anxious as parents, and that anxiousness is like spread to our children. And like, that's the anxious generation. And by the way, I'm not saying like, I'm not a parenting expert. I'm not advocating like, oh yeah, go to a major city and turn your teenager loose. Like, there's some thoughtfulness that goes into it for every family. It's up to them to decide how they go about this. And I can tell you a lot of things that our children will share with us around cool experiences they've had or confidence that they've developed in themselves has been a result of us allowing them to have some freedom and some autonomy to do some things they've never done before. Like this last week, we let our 2 oldest drive down to Phoenix by themselves and spend some time down there. And so, yeah, it's less about, I think, letting your kids do what they want. It's more about how do we raise children who are confident and aren't anxious.
And I will say, like your example about the subway with Tate, our oldest, and Paris. I'm like, okay, if Tate was female, I might have felt different about it. I just think that's interesting.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway, like you said, everyone would do what feels best for their family, their experience. And one thing I love, if you just look up this book, it says the premise of it is he argues that the author, Jonathan Haidt, argues that the rise in youth anxiety and depression is linked to the shift from a play-based childhood to one dominated by smartphones and social media. And then he goes through the impacts of that on kids. And he said the impacts of smartphones have actually impacted girls much different than it has impacted boys, which is just interesting. I don't know. I don't think I maybe would have noticed that or realized that, but he makes an interesting argument as to why that is and what those key impacts have been. But I wanted to double back on one story about our 10-year-old who has been wanting to ride his bike this past week. We're only probably just over a mile from the school, so it's not super far, but it does require crossing like a 4-lane highway.
Where there is a crosswalk guard.
There's a crosswalk guard there, which is why I feel comfortable about it. But it does take, a little bit of a conversation, like what path are you going to take to get to the crosswalk crossing guard. And there's no one on our street that he goes to school with. So it is riding his bike on his own. But it was so funny and it was so cute. The first day he rode his bike, first of all, he woke up early, like really early, to make sure his bike was perfect.
Made himself a breakfast sandwich.
Yeah. And then he realized, okay, my tire needs a little bit of air, and I have to put some air in his tire. And then he left like really early. He was just so excited. And we were because I had to drop off his sibling at school too. So he got, I don't know, a 7 or 8 minute head start on us. And then we left for school with his sister, and we caught up to him about right when he was getting to the crosswalk. And it was so funny. Like I rolled down my window. Chris was with me. Rolled down my window and I like hollered at him and was like, hi. And he was like, he also has to cross through a little wash to get to school. And he was like, I saw a coyote in the wash. And then later he was like, the coyote was like, you might have been exaggerating, but he's like, the coyote was like 1 foot away from me, Mom. And I was like really nervous. And then
we got chased by a dog.
Yeah, like a few 100 feet later, he was like, and then their dog just started chasing me. So I just had to pedal really fast. I just had to be faster than the dog. And the dog followed him for a while. But when I saw him like 2 minutes later, he had like the biggest smile on his face. He was so proud of himself that he had navigated all of that. And it was like this grand adventure that he had lived to tell the tale. And then the next day, same thing. He was up early, wanted to ride again. But it really did make me think about this book and how there are risks that our kids could make. They're going to be different depending on their age. But where you live and whatnot, taking these risks and letting our kids have some autonomy and have like some adventure in their life. Because I was absolutely an adventure for him to see the coyote and get chased by a dog. But that's like such a healthy way to have adventures and to grow.
Yeah. I thought about that too. It's like, that's like for a little boy, especially, it's magical. It's like one day I saw a coyote, I got chased by a dog, but he loved it. And he was just like the adventure of all of it. It's like, he would have missed out on all that if we were like, no, you're too young to ride your bike. It's not safe. Like, let us just take you. And doesn't he also talk about in the book that like the world isn't becoming as increasingly dangerous as we think it is? It's just that it's in front of us so much. Mm-hmm. And I think that's another thing to be aware of. And then, again, every family has to judge for themselves, like their own feeling of safety or not. But it's like, is the world like significantly more dangerous than when we were children? Some people would be like, emphatically, yes. I know a lot of other people like, no. I don't actually know, but I think what the book would have you understand is that the world is probably not as increasingly dangerous as we believe it is. It's just that we consume every aspect of the world, and unfortunately, the content that sells and gets viewed the most is content that's dangerous or violent or kidnappings and so, yeah, we speak a little bit what his theory on that is in the book around, is the world becoming like significantly more dangerous, or is it not? And we're just being bombarded with information that would have us believe it in such a way that's like, oh, I could never let my 10-year-old in any neighborhood or city or small town ride their bike to school.
Okay, you're going to have to read the book because I don't remember.
Read the book. But I do remember Melissa talking to me about that point, that it's like, it's not as actually increasingly as dangerous as we think it is. Now, there's certainly things to be aware of and new dangers, social media, online predators, like all that, but like overall,
the world in and of itself. Yeah.
I think
you live.
I think our town where we live is no more unsafe than when I was a child. Seriously.
Yeah.
But I don't feel that way. I feel like even in our town, it's like, well, is it okay for my kids to like ride their bikes down the street or go play? It's like, well, yeah, it is. Like, but I think media can do a really good job of like, this makes everyone anxious. Yeah. Like the book, The Anxious Generation.
Totally. In conclusion, this isn't like we have a ton to share here, but I do think that the more that we, as parents, Chris and I, allow our kids to do things like that, the more in general we get them. I guess that's a whole separate part of the conversation, is the smartphone conversation, which incidentally we are also in right now, like reevaluating the use of our.
We're just getting everyone Gab phones, including ourselves.
Yeah, we have.
That's how it feels someday.
Threatening to do that. And okay, you have to talk about the analogy that you told the kids recently.
Terrible. But I also think that part of what this book is saying too, our children's childhoods, and that could be up until 18, or as long as they're in their home, they are actually meant to be like adventurous though, and playful and fun. Like, isn't that like a core idea? Like, to a degree, if we're not careful, we will rob our children of childhoods that have a lot of adventure and fun and a little bit of risk, because it's very easy in today's world to say that there's a ton of kids who will grow up 0 to 18 that will spend almost all their time indoors. Their only sense of adventure or risk or do anything will be on a device. And it's just like, that's not how we were meant to live as human beings. That's not how children are meant to like grow up. They need to be outside. They need to be having some sense of adventure and risk. And sure, there were times even when I was a kid where we would stay up all night trying to beat a level on like Mario Brothers. So like I myself, like even in my childhood, it was different, but it was like, but I just think this idea of adventure and fun and a little bit of risk is like so healthy and useful.
He just talked also about girls and social media and how that, is something that we never had to deal with growing up. Social media and comparison, and how it's just not helping for our adolescent minds. And so I think that that's an interesting conversation too. Something to be aware.
So the analogy, is that what you want me to share? So a thought that occurred to me recently, it was like, if you consider the average cost of a smartphone, several $100s to $1,000 maybe. If someone ever came to me and said, hey, I got a deal for your kids. It's going to cost several $100s up front. Then it's going to cost probably at least a couple $100s a month. And it's guaranteed scientifically, research-backed, guaranteed to have a negative impact on their mental health. It's guaranteed to have a negative impact on their social skills. It's guaranteed to have a negative impact on their overall sense of like well-being. You want to do it? I'd be like, no. Why would I knowingly pay for the destruction of my child on what I just described as a cell phone? The research is abundantly clear, irrefutable. Cell phones and access to social media on those cell phones are contributing at a alarming rate to the mental, spiritual, emotional, physical demise of our children. And it like hit me. It's like, I'm funding my children's destruction. Like, and I'm being a bit dramatic, but I was like, what am I doing? Like, I'm participating in this. And I don't have the answer. Like we talk to families all the time. Like no one seems to have the answer, but I do think it has had us reflect and take another real serious look at just what is our policy as a family on phones, and at what age do you get a phone? What age do you get access to social media? Even when you get access to social media, how much access? It's just having us like tighten things down and look at things. And obviously we also live in this world, so it's like we got to prepare our children. So I was having this epiphany at the same time I watched this video by a Harvard professor, Arthur Brooks. Not sure if it was put out by him or by Harvard, but it's about a 5-minute video on boredom and how part of the reason so many children have record depression rates is because we've lost the ability to be bored. Not only have we lost the ability to be bored, people just don't have to be bored. Like even if you're sitting at a stoplight for 15 seconds, instead of just allowing your mind to like think, you just pull out your phone. And he said there's this really fascinating, we could put a link to the video in the show notes. It's a really fascinating video. And we watched it with all of our kids because we're like promoting boredom. Like, let's get bored as a family. Like, let's be still enough, long enough to be bored. Because what he said is when you're bored, there's certain parts of your brain that have to kick on that start to, question things, start to ask deep, insightful, meaningful, and sometimes confronting questions like, yeah, what is my purpose in life? What is the meaning of life? How am I living my life? Am I doing it? But on the surface, we want to avoid those questions. We don't want to like confront anything. So we just default like to this. So it's like, and as long as I'm staring at this, I don't have to think about things. I don't have to confront things. I don't have to ever get bored. But by not getting bored, I also don't maybe look at like the deeper parts of life. It's just like, wow, yeah. So it's even had me like, oh, it's okay to be bored. Like I'm sitting at a stoplight. I don't need to pull out my phone. I'm using the restroom. I don't need to pull out my phone. I could just like be with myself. And I just think we're losing, like kids need to have the ability to just be with themselves, even if it's uncomfortable. And I just think all of this ties together of like, how can we get our kids off of screens? Not all together, but how do we get them outside more often? How do we get them playing more often? How do we let them have more adventure? How do we let them take more risks so that they can go out and experience the world and find themselves and not be so anxious?
I think too, one thing he talks about in the book is it sometimes does feel like a lonely battle that, you're fighting as parents, but it is better if you have a more of a community. And maybe that's a community that you form, with people on your street or people at your kid's school. But if you can form a community where it's like, okay, let's talk and let's have a meeting about our kids are not going to have cell phones, or maybe they won't have social media, or whatever it is that you decide together. But it is better in community. So.
And one of the things that I've shared with my children that's kind of been, I don't know if it's useful or not, but is I tell my kids whenever they go, well, my friends, I always go, oh, thank you for sharing that. That's music to my ears. And they're like, why? I was like, because it confirms that we're on the right path. If everyone's doing it and we're not, like, that's usually a good thing. Like, so changing that narrative too with our kids, like if everyone's doing it in most things in society, in any stage of like civilization, that's not usually a great thing. And so it's also just changing that narrative. Like, yeah, we're not going to do things that like everyone does. And yeah, it can feel lonely, but I totally feel like it's worth the effort to get our kids out, off devices, playing, having adventure. Yeah, there are some things that we've allowed our children to do that I'm not saying I was like 100% behind it, or I was even like 100% convinced, but I was like, well, I think it's worth the risk of allowing them to go experience some things and have a sense of adventure and like a little bit of confidence that comes from like, oh, you know what? I did do that. And those have been some profound moments and profound experiences for our children.
I think too, I said in conclusion like 10 minutes ago, and then we kept talking for like 10 minutes. But I think as parents, it's okay also to come back to and keep revisiting a conversation over and over again and realizing like, okay, maybe we made this decision a year ago, but we're realizing that wasn't a decision that we wanted to continue to support. And yes, it's hard to like go back and change things to change. Say if you got your kid a cell phone and you're like, hey, I don't feel, I feel like, and how I might say it, I feel like, we got into this, we didn't realize the impacts of it, or we realized that I don't think we're there yet, we're ready for this, whatever it is. But you can go back to, and I think sometimes we have a tendency, Chris and I, to be like, well, they already have this thing or that thing, we can't take it away now, but you can. Like, there's no reason why, if you're listening and feeling like, oh, I wish we would have waited, it's like, well, is it easier if you would have not given it to your kids to begin with? Yes. And it's not just a given of it has to stay that way for forever. You can like recreate agreements and recreate how you're doing things.
It's awesome.
Okay. And the last thing I'll say is, it's coming up on Christmas time. And I feel like Christmas time is a time where you really think, where you're giving gifts. And sometimes it is cell phones, sometimes it is electronics. So let this be an opportunity to look at, like, what am I giving my kids for Christmas? And is it going to be this smartphone or that electronic? And maybe rethink. It'll look like, okay, or is there something that's a little more adventurous, a little more like outdoorsy that we could do instead? So, okay, week. See you guys next time.
All right. So that is it for today's episode of the Family Brand Podcast.
But before you go, we have something fun for you.
Yeah. Like if you've ever wondered, okay, so how's our family culture actually doing? We've got an incredible quiz for that.
Good news, it's quick, it's free, and when you're done with that quiz, we'll even email you this awesome PDF full of practical ways to strengthen your family culture right away.
So all you have to do is go to familybrand.com/quiz, take the quiz, grab the PDF.
We'll see you next time.